Alrighty then, welcome back to Death by Dragons. A little bit delayed again, I'm afraid. Largely because my work has got really busy, which means a lot of travelling, which means less spare time in the evenings. And I have been doing a lot of hobby stuff. Getting ready for a couple of tournaments that are coming up. So I have finally, he says, that's me touching wood, finished painting elves. I say, I must have painted 100 variations of elves. The list that I'm running in the battle report today is not the list that I'm taking to competitions, but I thought this was a pretty interesting match, and I just kind of want your advice. Oh, massed population of Kings of War players that watch my videos, hundreds upon hundreds of you. So this is an interesting match against a really, really good opponent. So I've been seeking out the better opponents in my region just because I think that's how you get better. And this was against Stefan, who I think is probably the best player, I want to say, in our region. Maybe that flatters his ego a bit much. He's terrible. He's also young and good looking. Hate him. Anyway, so this is a Kings of War battle report. It is Elves versus Undead at 2,000 points, played with real models. Very exciting. So let's quickly go through my elves first. So this is an elf list that I was running at the time, and I was having some difficulties with. I didn't quite know how to fix. I kind of liked it. And some context. Prior to running this battle, I had wiped one opponent off the table, and then been wiped off the table by another really good player. So this was kind of the let's just see if I can make this work kind of battle. So I started with 3 troops of Stourbridge cavalry. Stourbridge, I have formally said, are terrible. I'm very much still on the fence. I think they're pricey, but I listened to a countercharge episode from a long time ago where someone was talking about how to use them, and it kind of made sense. So I've gone with that, and I was having quite a lot of success with them, particularly against melee armies who really hated having to chase these nimble speed 10 cavalry around the table. Speed 9, speed 10, can't remember. I had a horde of boring archers with the boring seeking chant. 2 hordes of Dragon Riders, one with the Brewer's Strength, one with the old Orcish Skull Pole for 5 points, which is brilliant. 2 Dragon Breaths and a Standard Bearer with a Diadem. So I was running 3 Dragon Breaths. I was setting up kind of like a little enclave, so you put the archers down and you put the Dragon Breaths around them. But I was lacking in Inspiring, so this is a little bit cheaper, like 5-10 points cheaper, slightly less breath, but you get Inspiring, so that's my compromise. And then an Elven Mage, and I was running him with Mind Fog, Alchemist Curse, and the Inspiring Talisman. So he's my second Inspiring source. And my cunning plan with Mind Fog, Alchemist Curse is just money. Against high defense enemies, it's fantastic, especially at 10 dice. I was then running some allies, so I had a horde of Fire Elementals and a Druid. The Fire Elementals really were just to provide some meat for my army, a bit of tank, because there's no tank in my army. You know, everything is pretty much glass hammer or flying around. And so I gave the Druid Hex. So it's not a legendary spell, so they can take it. So the Druid's got Hex, and then the Elven Mage has got Mind Fog. And the plan is always get the Druid up on a hill, Hex every caster until they've got damage on them, and then Mind Fog them. So that's the plan. So you'll be able to see how that went in this battle. So that's my 2,000 points that I was running at this time. So against that, I was facing an Undead army with 2 Skeleton Warrior hordes, a Necromancer with Bane Chant and Heal, and the Army of Darkness formation, which gives 5 extra dice. So that is Heal 8, Bane Chant a million, 2 big blocks. You will remember it if you are a fan of the channel. I'm joking, there aren't any. But I played Steph's army a while ago, and he was running Double Dragons, Undead Pharaoh, but a similar theme. And you'll see, he's replaced a lot of the stuff with these Skeleton Warriors just because they're quite fun. 2 troops of Soul Reaver Cavalry, so a bit of chaff, fast chaff. A Pappy, mounted on a Winged Worm, who is a badass. A regiment of zombies, a regiment of Soul Reaver Cavalry, defense 6, awful. A horde of Barry Whites, awful. A troop of Wraiths, just because, and then Mortibris the Necromancer. So He's the one with the bubble of stealth. So we'll see that shortly, how that kind of pans out. So this is a very hitty, very heavy nerve, high defense undead army. And I'm facing it with not a lot of, well, a bit of crushing strength, but none of my shooting has piercing, apart from the archer horde. So kind of an interesting matchup. Let's see how it pans out. So this is the battlefield. As set up, I believe that is my legs, somebody's legs, Steph's legs, who knows. So we have nice looking battlefield, by the way. Do you not think? Nice buildings. Yeah, this is the Celestial Forge's buildings. They're really nice. So that is 2 height 4 forests, just the 1 height 2 hill. However, 3 height 4 blocking terrains. Now, I'm not saying that someone knew they were facing a shooting enemy and set up loads of blocking terrain in the middle of the board. I'm not saying that at all. 4 pieces of difficult terrain, height 0, and a couple of height 1 walls. Now, the scenario playing, I think, plunder. Yeah, so plunder is when you have 5 tokens along the center of the board, and then you designate 2 of them to be worth 2 points and 3 of them to be worth 1 point. So the person who rolls for side and wins picks the first token. So given that Steph's whole strategy is get everything in the stealth bubble and then crawl across the board and eat me, looking back on it, what I needed to do was not win the roll off, because then I could just put 1 token as far away as possible from wherever he puts the 2-point token. And you will predict by my slightly nihilistic tone of voice, I won the roll off for sides, and so had to place tokens, and Steph predictably put the second token right next to the first one. So these are the 1-point tokens down the ends, and there in the middle is where we will be engaging around the 2-point tokens. So let's talk deployment. So I was deploying first. What I'm doing in future, I'm trying to take a little time-lapse video of deployment, because I think it's interesting to see where we deploy. I deployed these fire elements. So what essentially, my plan was get Druid up on hill, hex Mortibris, and then just try and shoot everything else off the board before they get to me, kind of hemming them in with the Dracons. And then for some reason, I put the fire elementals all the way over on the left, miles away from the hill, where there are absolutely no use for guarding the archers. And then I spent 2 turns just trying to get them back with the rest of the army. So not really thinking what I did, the fire elementals went over there, which kind of put me on, it distracted me really early, basically, and I was kind of thinking, this is not great. So the Druid there behind them, because she has to go with them pretty much, even though I wanted her up on a hill. There you go. There's the archers. There's the 3 Silver Breeze. The Mage just there to jump up on the hill, because he is following the plan. And the Dragon's Breath and the Standard Bearer sticking behind the archers, and there's my Dracon. So pretty small army. You get the idea. Thinking about it now, looking back at my deployment, having deployed over there, I would probably have been better off putting a unit of Dracons with the Fire Elementals and just going for it on that side. So we could have had 1 set of Dracons and all my shooting on one side, and then another set of Dracons with the Fire Elementals on the other side. And that would at least have split his forces a bit more. Didn't think of that at the time because, yeah, well, there you go. You don't. So he deployed in a big lump in front of the tokens. There's the skeletons. There are the Barrow-wights. The Soul Reaver Cavalry on the left, and some zombies to the left of them to go and pick up tokens. His Wraiths there, ready to fly out and be annoying, and then the 2 Revcav troops on either side to chaff things up. And there is Pappy, right at the back. And then in amongst them, we have the Necromancer and Mortibris. Mortibris right in the centre there, because there's his bubble of stealth, and you can see it touches everything except the 1 Necromancer and the zombies. So everything there is automatically stealthy. Against a shooting army, that's money, isn't it? That's good. So this is how we set up. On to Elf turn 1. So, still very much fixated on this plan of keeping the army together as like a little meat shield and shooting things off as they come towards me. I immediately moved the fire elementals across, along with their druid, and everything else moved forward. So the elves, the archers moved up, and all of the Silverbreeze jumped up onto the hill to give good line of sight, along with a little wizard. Although frankly he had no line of sight. And I think I tried to bane chant one of the Silverbreeze and failed. And then the 2 dragons moved across to threaten on this side. So this really plays completely into Stefan's hands, because all he needs to do now is just move forward in a giant block and keep the stealthy on, and he'll be able to reach me pretty quickly. So this is where I ended up. So I took these screenshots from above, but I think the angle gets more and more skew-if throughout the battle report, so many apologies if it makes you feel squiffy or nauseous. So here we are, and we unleashed everything we had upon the front skeletons, because that's pretty much all we could see or reach, and did 7 points of damage, which is alright, but then he's got heal a billion from at least 3 of his characters, so I think he's probably going to be just okay. So on to the first undead turn. So he moved his hordes upwards, and he's splitting them between the 2 tokens pretty predictably. Excuse me. And then he just kind of shuffled his troops around and up. There was a lot of checking. So this was a we must have taken well over 3 hours playing this, because there was a huge amount of shuffling, checking, measuring. Do you agree this is in the front? Do you agree this is in the front? I think we should clock it next time, because we just spent far too long. By the end of the first hour, we were both kind of exhausted and quite bored. However, Pappy jumped right across to threaten over here by the tower. I think he wanted to kind of fly me to the side of the elementals and get rid of them while they were being annoying. And then that is Mortiferous moving up to enable his bubble of stealth to reach everyone except for Apathis. So this is where... oh no, Apathis was within the bubble of stealth. You can see Mortiferous there in the middle. So yeah, everyone's still within the stealth bubble, apart from, I think, the zombies again, because no one cares about zombies. And that's where everyone ended up. And then from there... he healed 5 points of damage immediately from the 7 that I'd done to his skeletons. So, yeah. There you go. That's the strategy. The plan works well. Elf turn 2. So, we are... that's right. So the elementals continue to move over, and finally thinking about what I was doing, I moved the dragons over to threaten. So that if anyone tried to charge them, there was at least somebody to counter-charge. Then, right, so what I did, Pappy was kind of just popping his head around the side of the building, so I moved this Dragon Breath and the Standard Bearer up, because they were within 18 inches, so that they could see him, but he couldn't see them. And then everyone else just kind of shuffled forward a bit, and the Dragons moved slightly over to get within a flanking position. Excuse me. And then for a reason that I can't quite remember, I hopped the Elf Mage off the hill. Which seemed to me to be a mental thing to do, but there you go, that's me. And this is where we all ended up. So you see the trees have been moved off of the wood, but you see where we all are. And then we unleashed hell upon Apathis, because that is the right thing to do. However, I rolled a ton of dice, and we did 8 points of damage, which is great. However, we realised that I'd rolled 10 dice too many when I was shooting him. So I had 1 Dragon's Breath and a Standard Bearer, which is 25 dice, but I rolled 35 dice, which was obviously not the right thing to do. And thinking about it, I think the archers might have shot somebody else. I've said they've shot Apathis, but I can't see how they'd see him from there. So I think they might have shot somebody else. Was there any other damage? Just looking a bit closer at the screenshot, no. Ah, maybe. I think they might have shot the Barrow Wights. Yeah, so along with these 2 Silverbreeze. However, Barrow Wights, within the stealth bubble, we did 1 whole point of damage. So, not a successful. The old fabled elf gun line, not really doing as predicted. So that's where we were at the end of Elf turn 2. On to Undead turn 2. So, in response to Pappy being shot to shit, these guys all moved forward, and Apathis turned around and legged it. Basically, as fast as he could. Backwards. I think it was next turn we realised that he'd been overshot. We took a couple. I think we took a couple of wounds off, to be fair. So what's happened is the Revcav on the left have moved out to be a bit of a screen, and then the zombies and the skeletons have moved up to try and grab tokens, and everything else has just kind of shifted over to the right. So this is where everybody ended up. And then I think it must have been Mortibris. So Mortibris lightning bolted the Silverbreeze cavalry, and I think did 2 wounds to them. I think that probably makes sense. I can't quite see the wounds on this screenshot. I think it's 1 wound. No, it's 1 wound. Yeah, so 1 wound, which is enough to kill a Silverbreeze cavalry unit, but fortunately managed not to. So on to... Oh yes, and then healed 3 of the wounds back off Pavis. So good for him. So then Elf turn 3. We continued with our plan. Now I'm right. I think this was a strategic error. So what I've done here is I've gone, oh no, there's Revenant Cavalry, and I've moved away with the elementals, which is silly because I know Revenant Cavalry, they're pretty strong, but they're not strong enough to pop a unit of elementals. And looking at this now, I think I was just so overwhelmed with this huge horde of defense 6 high nerve bastardness kind of shambling towards me that I was like, oh, let's move back so I can shoot them. On this left hand side, okay, the Soul Weavers could have come in a couple of turns, but actually I could have moved the Fire Elementals forward and taken out those Revcav with the Dracons. Maybe I would have taken a counter. Yeah, if I moved them forward though, I would have been in a better position then to be more aggressive and then to kind of hem him back a little bit. But anyway, I didn't. So yay me. What I did do was move the Dragon Breath and the Standard Bearer up a little bit and turned the archers around so we could just shoot them off basically. And then we kind of shuffled over onto the hill again with the Mage and the Silverbreeze. That's right, I moved the Dracons just out of the Revcav charge range there. So I didn't really want to get pinned down by some chaff. This is where everybody ended up. And we shot those Revcav off the board, which is fine. It's not that exciting. So really, there is literally no reason to have moved the Elementals and the Dracons back. Revcav don't have a high enough nerve to be able to cope with that amount of shooting. So everyone else shot at the other Revcav, who are still within Mortibris's bubble and in a field. And we managed to put one wound onto them. Well done me. Undead turn 3. So continue with the shambling forwards. These 2 units on the left, the zombies and the skeletons, moved over to claim those tokens, and everything else went forward in a giant move. And then to make it worse, he surged the skeleton horde really forward, and I think he got a really good, so like 5 or 6 inches extra on top of that move. And it was all getting a bit exciting now, finally, after playing for what must have been an hour and a half to get this far. I forgot to take a picture of that turn, so many apologies. What you have is a graphical representation of where they ended up. Sorry. So the skeletons ended up there, right in front of me, in front of my archers. I needed to do something, so it was all panic stations for me, really. Because behind them are some Defense 6 Soul Reaver Cavalry, there's some Barrowites, there's some Wraiths, and a Pathis. It was like, oh shit! So, a bit more Lightning Bolt. No, I don't think he did Lightning Bolt there. I think that's wrong, because he would have used him for Surge. So please ignore that. Couple of more heals went in. So what I did in response was I moved this Dragon Breath in front of the Soul Reaver Cavalry, sacrificing himself nobly. Finally remembering that these units actually can do things. So the Elementals moved down to threaten the flank of the skeletons, whereas the Dracons moved across to take on the zombies and skeletons on the left-hand side. The archers moved back to get out of charge range, and I moved my the Silverbreeze cavalry to just in front, so an inch away from the skeletons. I didn't want to charge them because we're useless in combat, so Silverbreeze hitting on 5s as opposed to the 4s from shooting, so I just kind of plopped them in a blocking position as chaff. And I did the same with the other 2. So I moved the middle one over to sit on the hedge, and the other one over. just as act as a barrier, I think. And the other one over to sit on the hedge in front of the Rev Cav. And then in dumbass move of the month, I shot my Dracons down the side to threaten the flank of various things. So either a Paphist, the Barrow-wights, the Wraiths, I wanted to go into the flank of something with them. However, those of you who are more experienced than me will recognise that an army with 24 Surge now has a unit of Dracons within like 8 inches. So this is where everybody ended up. I've no idea what these cavalry did at the bottom. They might have shot someone, I can't remember. Everyone else went into the Barrow-wights and did 6 points of damage, which is pretty good. Yeah, but it's alright. But not that dramatic. And no other damage was done. So, Undead turn 4. Yeah, basically, the big arrow represents the Barrow-wights, the Wraiths, and a Paphist turning round and just kind of moseying on over to say hi to my Dracons. And then the Barrow-wights were surged in the front, and the Wights were surged in the flank, which is not good. The Soul Reaver Cav went into the Dragon Breath, the Skeletons went into the Silverbreeze, and the other Rev Cav, the Rev Cav went into, the ones that are still alive, went in hindered into my other Silverbreeze. So this is where everybody ended up, and as you can see, he completely popped my Dracon unit, which is a bit shit, but there you go. Not unexpected if you actually think about it. He also killed my Dragon Breath, which isn't that exciting, and what I was really hoping here was that, you see where I put my Dracons, I was hoping that he wouldn't be able to back away far enough. He needed a 2 to get back behind the building, and unfortunately he did get that 2, putting him behind the building, so I couldn't flank his Soul Reaver Cavalry with my Dracons. Disappointing. Best laid plans. However, man of the match, the Silverbreeze, both wavered but not killed. So the advance forward is halted temporarily by these noble units sacrificing themselves. So what have I got left in Elf 5? So at this point, it's like I've got 2 turns left. He's on all the tokens. It's go big or go home time. Now I was planning at the end of the match to kind of flip around the Silverbreeze and shoot them off and get the tokens. That's not going to happen. I've got 1 left that isn't hindered or isn't wavered, and the other 2 are going to get chomped next turn. So the Elementals went into the flank of the Skeleton Horde. It's 36 on 4 and 2 should be able to do for them. And the Dracons, who are, these are the Crushing Strength ones, so these are Brewer Strength, so pretty fierce, and went into the zombies on the side to get that token off them. The hope then like an overrun and get out of the charge range of the Skeleton Horde. So that was my big gamble on turn 5. To stop the Barrow-wights joining in, these Silverbreeze chundered into them, and everyone else just kind of sat there. I think there was some shooting, which we'll come on to in a second. So this is where we ended up. We shot everything we had into the Soul Reaver Cavalry and did 6 points of damage. So that's Alchemist Curse, Archers, the Diadem of Dragonkite, 6 points of damage on Soul Reaver Cavalry, which was good. But that's where the good news ended, because I did, I think, 7 points of damage to the zombies with the Dracons, and did nothing, which means that I'm going to get recharged by a horde of skeletons next turn. And even worse, I did 17 points of damage with the Elementals to the horde, and then I rolled a 3 for their nerve, which isn't what you need. They didn't die, and now I'm going to get flanked by Soul Reaver Cavalry. So my 2 remaining main units are fucked. These guys just obviously bounced off the Barrow-wights. I think 1 point damage maybe, I don't know. And unsurprisingly, looking at this field where I now have practically nothing left apart from some archers and 2 wavered units, I resigned. So this is I was 6 points of damage to the zombies. This is that combat. Notice there's no actual skeletons on the skeleton base because he hadn't finished them yet. Shocking behaviour. Or this one, but this is where I ended up. There's all the damage we did with our 17 points of damage and nothing. And my Fire Elemental is about to be squished. Yeah, and there's the Barrow-wights, who I did 3 points of damage to. Get me. But still, they're going to eat those horsemen alive next turn. So all 3 horse units would get wiped off next turn. The elementals are going to get wiped off. The dragons are going to get wiped off, and I'd have a mage and an archer horde left for 1 turn of the game with no tokens. So I resigned. Undead victory. Mainly, it kind of what this showed to me was that my shooting, it's nimble, but it's very situational. Very situational. Against a defense 4 army, it works quite well. Against a defense 6 line, no, doesn't work too well. I tried after this mixing in a Greater Earth Elemental and dropping the Silverbreeze and putting some other things in. That worked a little bit better, but I'm trying a slightly different list now. So my next battle report will feature that list, which I'm quite happy. Oh no, it won't actually. My next battle report will feature a slightly different army, but I will do a battle report with my current elf list, which I'm reasonably happy with, and the one that I'm taking to the tournament to a tournament this weekend, which I'm very excited about. So that's the end. Crushing Defeat. If you have any suggestions about how you can cope with this kind of super stealth, super high defense army, please do let me know in the comments. Your input is valued and much appreciated. And in the meantime, we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.